Ladies and gentlemen, you know where you are. You know why you're here. It's Aquarian Anarchy. It is Sunday, 6 o'clock Eastern. This is the only place to be. Tonight's quote is from Ludwig von Mises. It is vain to fight totalitarianism by adopting totalitarian methods. Freedom can only be won by men unconditionally committed to the principles of freedom. And with that, we will tell you that right now we are still waiting on our special guest. I've sent him a couple of messages. Michael, if you're watching, come on, we're ready for you. But while we wait, we are going to break down a little bit about what Ludwig von Mises and his work and his contributions to the liberty movement mean to, especially me and Marcus, because we've studied his stuff and we're very familiar. Nicco,
it's my learning day. Hold on, wait, I got you.
An opportunity for Nicco to.
I'm ready, Captain.
That's right. Get the right on it. It's what's that thing Corey Frazier used to say? Get his smart book out or whatever.
Right.
G Frazier.
Oh yeah.
Shout out to G Frazier.
Yeah, where you hating ass been at? I miss you, man.
I know. We got to get him. We got to get him back on. I want to get him back on. Just him, so we can talk to him about his whole story, because he's got an amazing story. But let's get into it.
Happen,
you see Marcus. You see Marcus down there at the bottom of the screen. See Nicco wearing his I don't know, rap icon t-shirt there.
This Shy City, but I'm not even gonna trip. Like I don't even want to go into the story about the shirt.
Yeah, no,
the point being is that it's a nice shirt.
Yeah, it is.
And it reps Chicago.
It's solid. Yeah, I dig it. So Marcus, let's I'll let you kind of dig into this first, because I think you probably are the most, in terms of this stuff, the most read of it. I've read some of it. I'd be perfectly honest, like a lot of my reading is done by other people, and I listen to them read to me, because I drive so much that's the only way I can consume the amount of literary content that I do. And Human Action by Ludwig von Mises, as wonderful a work as it is very hard to stay awake when you are driving if you're listening to it, because it's super academic. The language is very
rudimentary.
No, the language is super
complicated.
The language is so elegant that it's hard to keep up. Like it's one of those books that you need a dictionary
right next to
so that every third page or something you can look up that word. You're like, what the fuck does obfuscary, or I don't know, some shit that like I've never heard before. Anyway,
what happened to our language? Why are we dumb like this? So I want to go back to the times where we used multi-syllabic words.
No, listen. So let me take this moment to plug the Men of Order blog. I know I told you I was going to let you talk, Marcus, but shut up. No.
I'm just butting right in now.
Oh shit. So doing this work, being like the executive editor, for lack of a better way of putting it, where I go through and proofread all the blogs as they come through. One of the things that, for SEO purposes and for readability purposes, they want you to talk to like this 3rd to 5th grade reading level.
For sure.
And my background in television, it was the same way. It was like, talk to stupid people.
Yeah.
Use language for stupid people, because we're trying to reach as many people as we can, and a lot of them are stupid. I agree. However, I kind of feel like this is the same as that like thought conversation. If you market yourself to thoughts, you're just going to create more thoughts. If you market yourself to dumb people, you're just going to make it to where being dumb is part of the equation. And if you elevate your content, I feel like you start to. So that's why, like, one of our great writers in terms of like consistency and like how methodical he goes about his process is Kamar Daniel. He writes all of our tech stuff, writes all about like hacking and all this, how to protect yourself from hackers, security, your password security, and your like personal information security, all this stuff. I told him, I was like, don't even pay attention to the readability stuff. I don't care. You are not talking to 3rd graders. You're talking to people who, hopefully, if they can understand this stuff, can be like the next tech entrepreneurs, or can actually elevate themselves. So like it's anyway. Yeah. To Nicco's point, like, how did we get so dumb? I think that's a big part of it, is that media has targeted
Stupid people.
dumbing everything down. Well, no, they've and by extension, they have dumbed everything down. So that now you don't have to know some of these words to even function in society.
And I think it's a little deeper than that too. And we'll get to Mises in a moment, but I think it goes a little deeper than that. You know, a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about Animal Farm, and Animal Farm isn't, you know, is aimed at a lexile, if you will, that's a little bit lower as well. But content matters. And not only do a lot of what is currently out about just about everything, not only is it easier to read to the point where, you know, a fifth grader could read it, it's also the content isn't the same. You know, the Animal Farm goes over a lot of really deep concepts, and those concepts aren't for fifth graders. And so not only have they dumbed things down in that way, but they've dumbed the content down as well. And Mises certainly did not do that. And Chad, you're muted, just so you know.
Oh yeah, not at all. That's
right. Yeah, but also, I have to be honest. You know, I found Mises pretty boring, and he's got fantastic one-liners. You know, using him as a meme source is huge because he has lots and lots of really good advice. But for those of you that don't know kind of where Mises comes from, he comes from a school of economics called Austrian economics. And there's a lot of people out there that don't like Austrian economics because it does things like says, you know, save money. It does things like says if you spend money, you no longer have money. You know, if you want to save money, you will still have money. If you want to invest in a company, then that company may, you know, make you money. So it's a very basic kind of understanding, and lots of people have made economics a very difficult system to understand. They want charts and graphs and all this craziness to explain it, and Mises kind of breaks that apart. For me personally, it is not Mises that really makes Austrian economics kind of make sense to me. It's actually Murray Rothbard. And Rothbard goes over the Fed. He goes over a lot of economic systems in several of his works. And he's also a hell of a lot more fun to read because Mises has more of a tone of a professor, and Rothbard has more of the tone of a rebel. And I like the rebel. But Mises also wasn't alone. There's a lot of other people, probably second to Mises in popularity is probably is Hayek, and Road to Serfdom should anybody that wants to read about freedom, that should be on their list as well. And there's a bit of difference between Mises and Hayek. Mises is kind of like old school, always been for free markets, and Hayek wasn't. Hayek was a socialist who kind of came along, and it looks like Michael's coming in. Awesome. So basically, at the end of the day, Mises and Hayek offer, and for that matter, Rothbard offers us an awful lot of meat to get into. I'm going to move Michael up to the top.
Oh, okay. Oh, sweet. White power. Let's go. Get down at the bottom, Nicco.
I've been waiting to say that, everybody. Chad has been up there.
Right. I've been holding back. Yeah. No, so, all right. So thank you so much, Michael, for joining us. Sorry for that introduction. That was a shitty introduction, but here we are. I'm Chad. You see Marcus and Nicco down below. I don't know how familiar. I know you've met Marcus before at the convention in 2018. Nicco joins us. He comes to us from Chicago, Illinois. So I've been trying trying to get him on the Mises and the LP train for a while. He's it's funny because like we started off like trying to introduce him to anarchism, and he's like, I'm not getting into politics at all, so I don't know what y'all want me to do. But
I'm like, you get it, yeah, you're an
exactly
anarchist.
right. Exactly right. But you've been grinding, you've been working hard, and we were just kind of getting into a little bit of like who Mises is, and kind of introducing people to like how this sort of the Mises Caucus became a thing, right? So I'll give you an opportunity to maybe expound on that.
So there's kind of two answers to that, because it was very close to being the Ron Paul Caucus.
Oh yeah.
So like in spirit, I would say it's the Ron Paul Caucus, because it's very much so aimed at trying to bring the liberty movement and the Ron Paul revolution and like all that periphery around that sprouted up around that into the Libertarian Party. I ultimately settled on Mises Caucus because, you know, Mises is the godfather of the tradition, you know, and Ron Paul was ultimately leaves on the route that was started by, well, Bombo-Arc, but Mises was really the one that revolutionized it. And so we wanted to kind of cast that wide net, and we wanted to appeal to kind of that whole circle of everything that makes up the Ron Paul movement, not just Mises, not just Rothbard, not just anarchists, not just, you know, minarchists or whatever. We wanted to kind of capture more than minarchy or anarchy. We wanted to capture, again, the word I'm going to keep using is the spirit of the Ron Paul revolution. And anybody that, I don't know, I know you guys, I know you, Marcus, and you, Chad, did. Nicco, I don't know if you were around in 2012 when that was going on, but anybody that experienced...
Nicco was like 10 or something.
I was wet behind the ears. I was a little kid. Yeah,
Nicco's 23, so he's
I'm a young lad out here that didn't pay attention to shit about politics. But
but anybody that experienced the Ron Paul revolution, I think, knows what I'm talking about when I say it was like a really special time, and there was just this electric energy in the community, and we were like brought together as a community largely for the first time, and there was like this crazy eclectic mix of like anti-war leftists and libertarians and Tea Party libertarian leaning Republicans, and you know, I had like survivalists that I was working with in Philly. I had, you know, conspiracy theory people who were super into Nikola Tesla, people who were super into food sovereignty. You know, like it was all this stuff that got brought together by Ron Paul. And, you know, unlike nowadays where we're fighting over each other's hyphenated anarchisms and all this shit, you know, everybody was just cool. Oh, you're down with Ron Paul? So am I. We're both working towards the same thing. We already know the utility of it. Let's go. And it was just beautiful. I don't know how else to say it. It was electric. And so that's why I'm kind of saying the spirit of the thing is more the Ron Paul revolution, because that's what I want back. I want that energy. I want that community. I want that feeling. And I'm happy to say that I don't think we've gotten to quite the heights of the Ron Paul revolution, but what we do have, I think, is characterized by that spirit in the Mises Caucus.
That's beautiful.
And I'm with you. You know, I've experienced an awful lot in my political lifetime, but nothing is the same as that. You know, we made a sign out in our yard in 2012 that, you know, for Ron Paul, as you know, we lived on a highway, and I've got a picture of a guy who is an avowed socialist sitting amongst me, who at the time I was a libertarian leaning conservative, and me and other libertarians, and just this big string of people that do not look, it looks like they should not be put together, but there they are at a sine wave in the middle of Indiana. You know, and I feel what you're talking about and have seen some of that myself, though I'm not personally actively involved in Mises, or for that matter, the LP. But what I see from...
Since when?
Because the Indiana sucks, dude, and I'm just going to be blunt. And I've lost an awful lot of faith. And it is people like you that can pull me back. And I think that it will take people like you to pull people like me back into the realm of, I don't want to just sit home and watch this thing burn.
We can get into that. First, but we're on the Ron Paul train. So I want to share like a story, like what was going on with me at the time that kind of characterizes it. Is Occupy Wall Street was happening around that time. And so like there was a big Occupy Philly group right in front of City Hall. And like I said, I was part of this eclectic mix of activists called Truth, Freedom, Prosperity that was headed up by Mike Salvi, N.A. Poe, Jim Babb, Mark Passio. Like these guys were all like the heads that brought me into this underground world. And because we had this dude, Fernando, who was like a hardcore survivalist, everybody who was camping out, they had tents. We had like a built to code structure with like ethanol, like heating lamps and like it was extremely comfortable and warm compared to everybody. So like we had a table on the inside and we would brew tea and we would ask people to come in and we would talk to them about the Fed. We were talking to them about income taxes, about gold, about all of this stuff. And like I was working at the time, so I would literally be working during the week and then on my days off go and sleep on the streets, you know, in Philly to talk to these people and hit, because we had a really high foot traffic area. And like I was so green back at that point that I didn't really, you know, I wasn't as hip to like this is a left wing movement. You know what I mean? Like I thought it was just a bunch of people against the banks and all that stuff. I learned as I went. You know, at one point we were running shifts at our tent and at that structure, and people were, you know, taking shifts, sleeping over and all that stuff. Well, one guy got caught by himself and slept in a tent next to it, and the commies came in, stole all of our shit, and then shat in the structure. That's when I was like, all right, well, fuck these people.
Got a dinner.
Yeah. So, what is that thing about the toothbrush? It's like that's what we're talking about. Like, damn, bro. Like, it ain't just about a toothbrush.
What are you talking about, man? Marx wouldn't have agreed with any of that. Nico's buddy tell us all about it.
Hey, whoa there.
But I had never done anything like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like sleeping out in the streets or marching down the streets, bullhorning about the Fed. You know what I mean? Like I never done anything like that. And there's so many people that it drove to those kinds of things. I did learn over time, though. I kind of felt that at the time while I was in it, I thought that everyone felt like me about what was happening. And I think it was more political and more ideological than it was personal for a lot of people, because it was all of those things for me. It was very, very personal for me, what was happening at that time, too, because I was still really young and you know, I was going through a lot of hard times at that point. And I didn't really know who I wanted to be and all that. And I was really at that time stuck in a really bad depression. And, you know, Ron, I've said this on Dave Smith's show, you know, a combination of like Ron Paul, shrooms, and heavy metal, like helped me break out of that. You know what I mean? Like metal gave me the release that I needed. It was always there for me. But and shrooms kind of like opened my eyes. But Ron gave me like the example of a person that I would like to be like, and I don't have to be this like shriveled, depressed thing that you know what I mean? Like, and I can strive to be great and brave and all this shit. And so it was very deeply personal for me, on top of like ideological.
So on that topic of it being personal for you, I want to as quickly as we can jump right into like the conversation you and I had last week about how, because like a big thread of what we do here, like there's some politics and there's some like, you know, what's going on in the world and like how to navigate through it sort of stuff. But a lot of where that rests is in character building, self-growth, spirituality, and like connection to something bigger than ourselves, and to a direction, a North Star that is sort of immutable, and also is something that we can remember regardless of what happens, whether we fail or whether we succeed in what we're trying to do, that we don't change who we are, that we we don't change our goals in terms of like what the type of person we want to be. You talked a lot about your personal like growth in that area, and like how you kind of came to this I don't want to say new, but like maybe a renewed sense of that for yourself. So like to the extent that you want to open up about that. Yeah, there you go.
I would say I came to an understanding, and to me it wasn't too dissimilar from the experience that I had waking up to the nap and waking up to Austrian economics, where it just kind of like boop, you know, like, and now you can see all this shit that you couldn't see before. And by seeing it, knowing it, you're responsible for how you act. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and there's all these realizations that come along with that. And it's been like that for me. And really for me, where this is why, you know, I nerd out on him, and I'm not trying to claim that the dude's an anarchist or anything like that, but
Right.
I'm a huge Jordan Peterson fanboy, for different reasons than I'm a Ron Paul fanboy. But Jordan is the one that's really kind of helped me walk down this path and learn a lot about myself. And one of the first things that I realized kind of encountering his work is something that I always felt but didn't understand until I came to Jordan's work, which is that, you know, you ask any of my personal friends, I've been highly involved. Like before I ever had the caucus, before I ever had a platform, you know, or any of this kind of stuff, I was grinding on the streets. I was, you know, organizing events, podcasting, doing man on the street interviews, strategizing. Like I've been in the game in one way, shape, or form ever since like 2011. And I've pretty much never stopped until there was a couple of years where I went through another bout of depression. But you know, I've pretty much always been in it. And then even when I was in the depression, I was yakking people's ears off and typing, you know, doing Facebook and all that shit. But anyway, the thing that I came to understand is that the reason I was doing all of this is that I derived intense meaning from it. I never would have put it that way like before encountering Peterson's work, but that helped me to understand that is what I'm doing. Like I'm pursuing meaning. And I would go as far as to say that if anyone's never watched them, Jordan Peterson's Bible lectures are absolutely incredible. Now, I know, like, when you hear Bible lectures, you know, you might think of, like, Joel Osteen, like, Bible thumping and, you know, this kind of shit. But it's not like that at all. And if you're not familiar with, like, Carl Jung and the psychoanalysts, then you've never heard anything like this content before in your life.
Nice.
So what those Bible... Yeah, man, I would highly recommend it, because, like, what those lectures are all about is basically I'll see if I can do it justice. It's a lot. It's a huge time investment if you go to watch them, but you'll get sucked in. But
yeah, he didn't even get into the Bible for like 2 hours almost, the first one. It's like he gives a backdrop for like an hour and a half or so, and he's like, I haven't even read a word of the Bible yet, and we're already like done with the first section or whatever. You know, it's like
but he sets up the framework that he's approaching it from. And the framework that he was approaching it from is looking at the idea, like, people think about the Bible and then they think of God, and they think of like this ephemeral thing in the sky that's outside of ourselves, and, you know, all of that, where the approach that he looks at it is how did we emerge from the jungles, and with that came the idea of God, or the idea of the individual, or the idea of liberty. And, you know, like, how did these ideas emerge with us when it's not exactly intuitive when you think, like, it's not exactly obvious how that happened when you go back, like, if you trace our evolution back to, like, emerging from the jungles and, you know, dealing with saber-toothed tigers and shit. You know what I mean? Like, so it seems that there was a huge part of human history where we observed each other, and over the course of that time started deriving certain patterns or principles that work within human behavior, and started writing that down. And the ones that work most became divine ideas that we then ensconced within these stories. Now, I don't mean to call them stories in a disrespectful way, but you know, one of the crazy things I learned is that there's a sense in which the principles in the Bible and all that are real, even if it's completely metaphysically not real and completely historically not real. And that was like what the fuck, you know what I mean? Like, takeaways from watching these Bible lectures. But anyway, so he's looking at these ideas through the lens of evolutionary psychology, and how did we arrive at these ideas? How did we derive our meaning from them? And he's doing it from a particular Carl Jungian bent. So, like, that's what those lectures are about. Again, if you don't know anything about the psychoanalyst, you've never heard anything like this in your life. And that's where I was when I watched it.
Yeah, I'm familiar with Jung, and you know, generally agree with him. One of the things that I picked up years ago, and Michael, you may not know this, but I have a weird religion. I'm a freak, but and I accept God as God. But at
Marcus is voodoo Santa Claus. He just doesn't want to admit it. Anyway, go ahead.
But one of the things I learned a very long time ago is that truths and facts are two different words. And just because something is a fact doesn't necessarily mean that it is a truth, and vice versa. And what I find in the Bible itself is that there are a bunch of truths in there, and whether or not this, that, or the other thing happened or not doesn't really matter, because it isn't about, a lot of people, I think that Christians miss when they try to make the Bible a historical document, they miss a huge tool in their hands. If anybody wants to really look at whether or not it is a historical fact, you can read Thomas Paine's Age of Reason, and he'll destroy any thought that that the Bible was factual as a historical document. But Jesus does save, and Jesus is the manifestation of God upon earth. He is God. And because of that, realization and that being a truth, it changes how things function. So for me, I just wanted to kind of add that piece in.
So, yeah, and I'll add to what you're saying is something that I've been thinking up and kind of coming to, and I'd be happy to bounce it with you because I'm still developing, you know what I mean? But is there's multiple kinds of truth. And we already know of at least two, right? Like we know of empirical truth. So that's like the scientific method. That's if I take two hydrogen models or atoms,
Right.
put them together, and with a hydrogen, I'm going to get water, So like, then there's logical truth. That's math. That is the a priori logical deductive methodology of the Austrian school. It's logical truth. It's I keep forgetting the word for this, but it's the kind of truth where if you go to refute it, you prove it true in trying to disprove it, like argumentation.
Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah, I don't remember the word either, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So like, there's that, but then what I'm kind of seeing from this kind of evolutionary psychology / spiritual realm thing is, I think there's a third form of truth, and I'm trying to work out a title for it, but I want to call it phenomenological truth, or that which works when you act it out.
Nice.
You know what I mean? Like
active truth,
something like that. Yeah. So like, go ahead.
No, it's something like where you have to, you always have to merge it. So what one thing is like science and religion are separated, but when you combine the two, it's like true spirituality. And so there's multiple forms of truth that can be placed in front of an individual, and there's, like you said, irrefutable truths, there's logical truths. What's the other one?
That's what we're trying to figure out.
So the word I'm using,
I think phenomenological sounds like the right way to go. Honestly, that's where I would go with it.
That's my working title is phenomenological truth. So let me give you an example of this, and this was something that smacked me in the face from a Jordan Peterson quote. So he was debating Sam Harris about, like the utility of religion, and Sam Harris is coming from the atheist direction and all of that stuff. And, Harris challenged him kind of arrogantly and was like, well, why don't you give me an example of a prayer that's ever been answered? Thinking some magic man from the sky is going to drop the solution to your problems,
Right.
And then like, that's what serious people think. Jordan goes, oh, well, that's easy. I can definitely tell you that one. He's like, here, why don't you do this? Why don't you sit on the corner of your bed and just kind of close your eyes and really think about what you're doing in your life to screw your life up. Like, what are the little things about you that you could polish up? Now, when you ask the question, it's like, it's not in vain. You have to really go deep, and you have to really mean it. And you have to really be ready to accept the answer that emerges up out of you. And he's like, and if you do that, you will get an answer. And it's one of those things where, how do you prove that? You know what I mean? But at the same time, I'm like, I know exactly what you're talking about.
How do you disprove it?
Well, right, but that's my point. Is we've all experienced it.
It's an experiential truth.
So it's a phenomenon, because it's like when you do that process, when you act out, okay, I'm going to ask myself, then there's almost like a natural law. Another way of looking at it, like a natural phenomenon that emerges up out of you to answer that. And then I don't know what to do with that, because that actually happens, and And so like,
and also like
creepy.
you know that like when you deny that, when you ignore it, when you ask for that and you get the answer and you're like, nah, that's not it.
But I would
your
say that's
life
another form
will
of
continue
truth.
to your life will continue to you'll continue to struggle with whatever that is. You know, that's the phenomenon that a lot of people who deal with addiction or anything like that, like it's when you finally come to the realize like, hey, you know what, this is fucking my life up. I need to change something up here. That's when you actually make the change, and it actually gets you moving in the right direction. But yeah, anyway, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Well, no, I was just saying so I almost think that constitutes another form of truth, because that actually happens, and it actually has effects on our lives when we get in tune with it, you know? So like, what do you do with that? You know, like, so like one part of the conversation that I had with you, Chad, is that, you know, prior to like in the immediate time prior to me starting the Mises Caucus, it was an idea that I was kicking around in my head. I didn't know it was going to be this super serious thing that it turned out to be. But I was kicking this idea around, but I was also kind of on the heels of like, I'm not ready to like tell the story publicly, but I was on the heels of something really traumatic that happened with me, where the best way that I could describe it is I had an encounter with my own shadow. I had a direct encounter with my own capacity to commit evil, and it floored me. It floored me because I was really naive before that, and just kind of felt like, and frankly, I think I was an ideologue to some extent prior to this, because I thought that my libertarian ideology, I'm all about the NAP. I would never break that, and you know, all this stuff. So I'm a good person, and I think this naive belief in prior to that point of me being a good person enabled me to be taken by my shadow, because prior to that, you know, I'll say this: the shadow that I encountered, it was born out of selfishness. I'll say that, and
almost always is, or ego.
I'm sorry.
I said it almost always is, or ego, one of the two, selfishness or ego. But selfishness is a product of ego.
But again, prior to this realization, prior to this, like seeing this in myself, I had naively believed that I was a good person, and so like I kind of had evil in a vacuum of like malice and hatred and all that stuff. I never would have thought that evil was born out of selfishness. You know what I mean? Or could be born out of selfishness. And yet I was very, very brutally smacked in the face with my own shadow, and I had to come to grips with that. And I didn't know what to do with that for a little while, actually, until I encountered Jordan's work. And I forget where I started as to why I was going down that road. Fuck.
Just how you got to do the Mises Caucus thing. You were kicking around in your head.
Thank you.
There, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So like that's where I was coming into the caucus. But then, you know, at that time I had asked God for a path. Now I don't even know what I mean when I say that, to be honest with you. Like, but I did, and I'll be fucked if that didn't actually happen.
Can I pause you right there real quick? What you just said like really landed on me. Like, you asked God for a path, and you don't even know what you meant by that. Like, that by itself, that's one of those things that like I don't either. I don't know where that comes from. But like, it's there. Like, and I think all of us experiences that at some point, on some level.
I don't like the casual usage of the word God. You know what I mean? Like, I don't or I believe in God. I think these are very complicated and complex and mystical subjects that are
personal,
really beyond us, deeply personal and kind of beyond us. And I think a lot of organized religion has kind of, how do I word this? It has people acting out traditions they don't understand. And spirituality is all tradition and no faith and no spirit. You know, it's just acting out traditions and going along with it because that's what you've been told, and then I'm supposed to feel this thing. And I think there's been an externalization of God where we give the responsibility to solve our problems is given up to faith in God, where really it's you have to have faith in yourself to be on the proper path, or at least that's how I see it.
I agree.
No, that's 100%.
Michael. I gotta say that what you've described is I mean, to the T. There's a New Age writer named Carolyn Mace, And what you've described is exactly what she describes as the dark night of the soul. You found your dark place. You were at an evil. You found the interior evil, and you were lost. And in Kabbalistic terms, which is a Hebraic mystical term, what you did for yourself at that time was you crossed what is called da'ath, or the abyss. And by knowing the word da'ath, the abyss, the thing that we want to get past, is the word da'ath means knowledge. Because to truly realize, or what would be bana, which is understand, we have to lose our knowledge. We have to lose that ability. And that is exactly the pathway that you walk down. So what it sounds like for me, because I've got 25 years of spiritual experience, I've been studying spirituality since I was 18 years old. And for me, you walked the path of a mystic to get to these ideas.
Well, I appreciate that. Yeah, I don't know what to say to that.
What I'm trying to, well, because, and most people aren't, and most people don't know. You can't know. No one knows what the end of their journey will be. The point of a journey is not to arrive. The point of a journey is to get from where you were. And what Aristotle would say is that it is important for us to, or the pathway to wisdom is knowledge of self. And so what you've done is you went into those interior mansions in your mind, and that has led you to be the person you are. You wouldn't be able to be Michael Heise, the chair of the Mises Caucus, if you hadn't made this journey, because all great people make this journey. And so continue with where this journey is taking you.
Well, so like I said, I asked God for a path, and I'll be fucked if one didn't open up. That's like the creepy thing about it. Like it actually happened. And so like when I say it actually happened, like I started dating my wife Emily, at around this time, and we just got married in October, and it's awesome. And like we so thank you. Thank you. So that it started with that. I got hooked up with a guy who was actually like I started working for an attorney, and I got hooked up with him from a prior employer who knew this attorney through his church. And I started taking courses at Liberty University, because at this time I was, prior to this, I used to want to be a celebritarian, right? Like I wanted to be a figure. And at this, like prior to this anyway, at this point, I'm kind of giving up on that. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to have to conform. I'm going to have to build a career, and I'm going to have to get myself stable. And then I can kind of work it out from there and all of these things. So I was kind of submitting to that. And so I was taking courses to become a paralegal, got this job with the paralegal. So at that point I'm like, all right, well, and I took one semester of courses and got this job. You know what I mean? So like, I'm like, all right, well, I can stop school. I guess I got the beginnings of a career. I just going to have to develop my skills and all this stuff, so like that happened, and that was like a godsend at the time. Started dating Emily, and then also the caucus had started. And, it was what's the word? I don't know. We'll say fortuitous, like how things started with the caucus at the beginning, because I started the Facebook group that same day, like 3 hours later, was the first time that the chair of the party basically said that the Mises Institute was full of Nazis. So I wake up the next day and there's like 500 people in my group, rah, rah, rah. And I'm like, oh, fuck, like, and so, and so like, I kind of like carried that, tried to carry that torch and mold it as much as I could. But my point in saying is, I didn't know that was going to happen. Like this was just some idea of like how I wanted to bring the Ron Paul revolution into the Libertarian Party. I didn't realize at the time that I was apparently going to like a blood war with the leadership of the Libertarian Party. But that's, so it's like this stupid blind faith kind of thing. But, all of those things have borne extreme fruit. It didn't turn out that I became a paralegal. I didn't actually expand my skill set beyond the very bare minimum of what this guy trained me to be. But he saw that I was very passionate about this and that I was working this, and basically he allowed me to use this job and use my limited skill set to kind of get myself situated and build that base from which to launch this thing. So like that worked out that way. Emily's my wife now. Yeah, you know, the caucus is my job now. You know, like I do this full time now, and you know, and I love every day.
You were doing it full time already. You just weren't on the payroll. You were just grinding, making phone calls. While
so like I actually changed jobs at one point to do it full time. Like before I actually went full time, I left the job at the law office to take a job delivering weed.
You're driving truck, weren't you? Yeah.
Not a truck, but it was just a inconspicuous vehicle where I was delivering weed to patients here in Pennsylvania. But I took that job because, well, one, it was paying like I think $20 an hour. Two, I was getting tipped under the table on top of that. But three, I can make phone calls all fucking day while I'm, you know what I mean? While I'm, and that's what I did. You know, I would just be talking. Hey, give me 2 seconds. I got to deliver some weed. You know, and go and do that thing. All right, sorry, thanks, I'm back. You know, talking to
nice,
you know, high end people. But yeah, so like it's taken me here, and the more it doesn't feel like, you know, people say crazy shit to me about the caucus. I'm like, oh my God, thank you, you did this thing, and it doesn't feel like I've done it. That's the weird thing for me. It feels like
imposter syndrome.
Not imposter syndrome. It feels like I asked for this path. It opened up. I'm doing my best to run down it, and the more I run down it, the more it seems to open up, and then people tell me crazy shit when I'm just trying to walk down it. You know what I mean? Like, and that's ultimately what's important, is because the more that to me anyway, is because the more that I walk down that path, I feel like the better and more fulfilling that my life has gotten. You know, I really did used to be an ideologue. I really did used to be like depressed and wishing death upon myself and like all of this shit. And now that's like so far from me that it's unbelievable, and I couldn't imagine such a thing. You know what I mean? So like,
that's beautiful, man.
So what's funny about that though is that to me is that this is all totally predictable because like this is what like I have experienced too, and I think everybody, well, like when you actually like really go and start following that path, that's what happens. And it's funny because like before we like talked amongst ourselves and said like, hey, let's try to get Michael on. And that's when I like hit you up and everything. And then we had our phone conversation like Wednesday, I think it was Wednesday or Thursday. Marcus was like, hey, what do y'all want to talk about this week? This was previous when Marcus was on his old job. And I was like, let's just do God works in mysterious ways. And let's just talk about that. And then we start talking about this stuff and everything. Marcus loses that job because like Facebook and anyway, some messed up stuff. But anyway, so at that point, Marcus is like, I don't know, man. God's kind of got it in for me right now. No, he wasn't there, but it was like things were getting rough. And so we kind of, you know, I talked him off the ledge a little bit, and now he's got a new job, even better than before, and everything else.
I'm going to be able to deal with Bitcoin.
And so right.
Nice.
And so now, what's funny is like what I have noticed with my lived experience has been is that like when you figure that out and you ask for it, and then you walk in the path of whatever the answer is. I did a thing this morning on this little series that I'm doing with this meditation about like, and it's about Jesus's first miracle at Cana, where the wedding party like approaches Mary and they're like, hey, we're running out of wine. What do we do? And she goes to Jesus and she's like, hey, they're running out of wine. What can you do? And he's like, my time has not yet come. And she's like, y'all do whatever he tells you to do. And that's the bar. The whole thing is do whatever he tells you to do. So like when you ask for that and then you get the answer and you start doing it, it's only logical that all this stuff opens up for you. To me, that's like
right.
perfectly predictable.
Here's one of the things that's crazy though, is when you say that do whatever Jesus or God tells you to do. Again, I think there's this common parlance thing that people do in their head where they think Jesus, this actual guy from 2,000 years ago, or God, this actual thing that's out in the sky. And I'm not trying to dismiss that. I'm not trying to make a metaphysical claim, but I'm trying to say that there is a direct one-to-one that works extremely well. And and here's the crazy thing. It's logic. There's a logic underneath all of it when you look at it all psychologically. If you look at everything in terms of psychological patterns, or that phenomenological thing of when you act this out, you get this back, from almost like natural law. And how that your psychological disposition plays a part in that kind of thing, then it, like I said, it's almost like it's real regardless of if it's historically or even metaphysically real. Right. That's not me making a claim about the historicity or the metaphysics. I'm just saying there's this whole other logical underpinning that I've found that that works for me. So it puts me in this, funny situation where I'll go to I'll go to family events and they're a little bit more traditional Christian than I am and everything. I'm like, have you found Jesus yet? And I'm like, I believe so, but I don't think I mean the same thing you mean. You know what I mean? Like,
it's like, where's Waldo? Well, here, over there.
So,
and then they just say, "Oh, well, he'll get there."
Sure. So for me, I've had a off again, on again, romance, if you will, in my own mind with the Mises Caucus. And part of that was because I was connected to Adam and shit pissed me off and all of that stuff. But I really do think that the LP may not realize it. And I'm talking about people not in the Mises Caucus and the LP, but for survival. And I personally think that the Libertarian Party is essential in this country. And this is coming from somebody who does not believe that we are going to reach freedom through the ballot box.
See, people telling me crazy shit again.
Right. But But for me, the LP needs the Mises Caucus. They just like everything leads to another thing, just like what you're talking about. The Mises Caucus, for me, provides hope that they can get to that Rothbard mentality or that Mises mentality or that Ron Paul mentality, because the LP has lost its way. And I'm not trying to say that there aren't great people who don't consider themselves Mises Caucus members. There are many. I've met thousands, and they are wonderful people. But we are not leftists. And we are not on the right. We are something different. And the Mises Caucus puts that first and foremost. It says we are people who believe in freedom. We are people who and we're not going to define that for you. And what I'm also seeing, and this may be your messaging, Michael, but what I'm seeing is come aboard. If you believe in freedom, join us. We'll work out the bullshit later. Let's get freedom because they're taking our shit away.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. Like, if there hasn't been there's been to me a gross miscarriage of the platform to take these last 2 years, and just whistle past the graveyard the way the LP has. Meanwhile, and that's not what the Mises. Not what the Mises folks are doing. In the meantime, what the LP establishment is doing is they are doing everything they can to, and I don't want to. I promise you, we wouldn't get into all the inside baseball stuff because I know there's a lot of stuff that, and you're working hard to try to make sure that that well-meaning people are considered.
We had 2 big victories this weekend
as allies. Yeah, I saw that. That's awesome. But what this country, what the world needs is a tangible manifestation of there's somebody who's actually trying to really fight for this stuff. And the LP had this golden opportunity to say, look, they got it wrong this way, they got it wrong this way, and we would have had it right from the beginning. And instead they were, anyway, it's they were
so
going
a couple of observations that I've made. We're talking about how the Libertarian Party has lost its way and how it's failed and all this stuff. And I think that the most common arguments and the most easy arguments to point out to are, you look at the messaging or in the case of the COVID regime, the lack of messaging and the lockdowns and lack of messaging. And I think people attribute to that, the Libertarian Party has lost its principles and that's the problem. That's a problem, but it's not the problem. And it's that stuff is secondary. The problem is people of low character have been allowed to be the leadership of this thing for a very long time. So like there was really a situation where
the former
47
chair is a
members
gravely
were
dishonest
removed from
person.
the
I'll say it. I'll say it whether you know, and you know,
But
you want
with
to distance
Sarwark.
yourself from it or whatever, but he's
Both
a
of them.
gravely dishonest person.
Right, and so like, or for example, or all right, we'll just use Sarwark. All the lying that Sarwark did, all of that character assassination, that wouldn't just all of a sudden be cool if he was like a Rothbardian and Ron Paul guy.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's not the ideology that makes somebody fit to or deserving of power.
Mm-hmm.
That's not. You know, like it's your character. It's you know. The hobbits weren't libertarians. They were simple people who were humble and you know what I mean? Like, and all that stuff. It wasn't actually about ideology. And I think we've gone down this road of kind of assigning moral status to people on the basis of their ideology. And now I do
agree with
that's not to, and I now that's not to say that I don't think that libertarianism is a deeply moral ideology. Whether or not it's even an ideology is actually a whole nother rabbit hole that I would like to maybe talk about. But
but to your point, though, if you get at that by being dishonest and sacrificing your character, what difference does it make? Right.
And the character is the thing. That is one of the evolutions that I have made. I would say in the past 2-3 years is you know, I'm still every bit ANCAP as I've ever been. But I'm starting to realize that the liberty argument is actually secondary to the meaning and the character thing. You know, you can't have liberty in a society of unconscious nihilists. You just can't do it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like, again, this is why I think the Jordan Peterson thing is so huge. And frankly, I think the libertarian community has missed and is actively missing a huge opportunity because, you know, there's two primary ways that you can you know, for the purposes of this binary anyway, there's two primary ways that you can sell libertarianism, which is, you know, one way is liberty and freedom is being able to do whatever the fuck I want as long as I don't hurt anybody, which sounds like something an 8-year-old would say. Or liberty and freedom is taking full responsibility for my life. That sounds like something an adult would say. I don't think it's a coincidence that Ron Paul ran on the latter and became a cultural phenomenon. And then likewise, Jordan, now he didn't run, but you get my point. He ran on a platform of voluntarily adopt responsibility in your own life, and that will imbue you with the meaning needed to get past the flood. And the flood will come in your life. And because life is characterized by suffering. And I don't think it's a coincidence that Ron Paul had that responsibility core to his liberty message, became a cultural phenomenon. Jordan Peterson was full bore on the responsibility aspect of it and became a global cultural phenomenon. And I think there's a lot of overlap there, and I think there's something to learn from that. And so the character thing, you know, the party has kind of taken on this left progressive cultural identity for the past while that is indicative of I can do whatever the fuck I want as long as I don't hurt anybody. And that's what one of the things culturally that we're trying to change with the party is to bring it back to no. It's my liberty is my responsibility, you know, and it takes character to handle your responsibilities and to take on more responsibilities, you know, and like this also kind of goes into there's some talk in the liberty world of like we need to get power because the COVID regime is out of control. I've never felt the state on my doorsteps the way that it is right now. And so we need to get power and we need to use it, you know, against our enemies, and we need to do this or that. And it's like on the surface, I totally get what they're saying, but power and responsibility are like liberty and responsibility. You know, like, you know what I mean? Like it's they're what, put it this way, with great power comes great responsibility, right? Like I know it's a Spider-Man quote, but it's
Spider-Man,
true. But it's also, but I think it's also indicative of if you have a high degree of responsibility, you can either use that as if it's a responsibility, or you can use it as if it's power, and which one you act out will determine the color of what you get back.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. It's
and the fruits of it too. You know, like what you provide.
The analog of this is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? You can make airtight logical arguments that are completely true that it's both. So logic has its limits. The question is because really that's just a metaphor for optimism and pessimism or nihilism or whatever.
I agree with Voltaire. I just want to tend my garden.
Well, so the question isn't actually, is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? It's what happens when you act out either premise.
Mm-hmm.
That's the question.
For sure.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, because even if you think the glass is half empty, what does that lead you to do?
Right.
Does that lead,
exactly.
You know,
right.
That's why
deep depression and like nihilism and murderous tendencies, or does it lead you to what can I do to fill
right? That's
up?
Voltaire's point. When I'm saying Voltaire, what I'm saying is I'll just tend my garden. That's what he's talking about. At the end of Candide, which is an examination of pessimism and optimism, at the end of Candide, and I believe it's Candide says, I'll just tend my garden. Which what he meant from that is his life, which is his garden, is what his focus was on, not on whether it was optimistic or pessimistic. I do want to interject as well one thing, and that is that this none of this is new. You know, Adam Smith talked about this in Wealth of Nations. Years ago, and that the more you have character and the more people base their lives on giving other people freedom, the more the moral things come, and these are the kinds of lives that we want to live. Aren't because we want to be able to do whatever the fuck we want. We want to live our lives, build and be happy. Ultimately, that's what people want. So continue.
I mean, just to give you an example from my experience, like recently with this whole half glass full, half, is it power, is it responsibility kind of tip that I'm on. I got a lot of people who hate me in the Libertarian Party, and they attribute all kinds of malice to me. They attribute all kinds of malfeasance on me, and all this kind of stuff, right? So, and they're seeing that because, we're coming in, we're saying we're taking over, right? And they're trying to mischaracterize it like, we're the Vikings coming through and we don't want what's best for the party. But, this is where they're coming from. I'm destroying the party. I'm doing all this stuff. And to them, what I have is power because I'm bringing the party under one man's control and all this shit. You know what I mean? Which is not even true, but that's what they're saying. On the other hand, here's my actual experience. I'm not going to name his name, but I got a phone call from a guy the other night who is an organizer of mine in one of these states. This guy was calling me an hour after his mother died. Okay, I've never experienced anything like this in my life. He called me an hour after his mother died to have a heart-to-heart with me. He was being strong, and he was like, "Look, man, I got some shit that I got to take care of with my family right now. But through the process of his mother, passing and everything, he basically told me that he had learned what was important in life. And that, he started being like, look, I have been lazy. I told you I was going to do this job and I haven't done it. And I feel really guilty about that. I need a little time. I'm going to be okay. I have to get through this. I'm getting married and like, I have my priorities straight. Like my wife is the most important thing. And then my job and then my volunteer time. And this is my volunteer time. But like, this is an important thing. And you like said all this crazy stuff to me. Now, is that power or is that, holy shit, some guy just fucking called me? Like, he thinks enough of this.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, he thinks, no, seriously, like, this is really meaningful to him. And like, and he, it's
but it
so
lays a lot on you
him.
Too. Like, it's like,
but that's my point. Is that power or is that a responsibility? Because people do apparently find so much meaning in this community and all of that stuff. Like if I fuck this up, I'm probably not living right. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot for me to have to understand that that's where it is with some people. Like I do have a responsibility to like maintain this thing that people apparently find so much meaning in that they'll call me, or at least one of them will call me when an hour after I was totally for that happened.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But I don't
it's
know
a great
if
responsibility,
kind of
man.
point well here. Yeah.
Oh,
But
absolutely.
I don't know if I'm making my point.
You are, and that's the whole reason why I wanted to do this is because I think that like that mischaracterization of you and of the whole movement, everything has been there needed to be, and I didn't want it to be something about the, he said, she said, or who said this, and, all the facts or any of that stuff. I wanted people to get an experience of like who you are and what motivates you and what drives you first and foremost. And then from there, like you can read all the rest of the tea leaves however you want to. Nicco, you were trying to say something. I'm sorry.
No, I was saying it's a result of power that gives you that responsibility. So it's like, since people see you in that limelight of power and things of that nature, and the kind of person that you are to them, on a day-to-day, your character speaks. It's like, this is somebody that I want to inform and fill out. And once you get shocked and realized in certain situations, their priorities in life. And since you guys were both on this for volunteering, the time, he called you out, and that's a lot of, how do you say, respect for a power. You feel me? He's got a lot of respect for you, and for one of the people to call you and talk to you specifically about it, prior to being, or aside from it to being business, it's something that, like, if it's your character, that's great, and you have like a position, people are just bound to reach out. That's just how it is, and those are the doors. Those are the different doors that open up to you as well.
And it sounds like that you helped him, and ultimately, I mean, why else are we doing this if it's not to help people? Michael, I know that you had about an hour with us, so I'm going to try to kind of move in the direction of wrapping up. But what I find in you particularly is that I have a similar heart in many ways to the way you do. I devote myself to the things that I believe in, and I have an idea, and I'm gonna fucking get it, no matter how I have, what I have to do to get there. And what I find particularly interesting about you, myself, is that you seem to pull that energy from straight out of your ass. You just are able, right? You are able, like almost like a robot, to just keep going. I mean, there are times when I just cannot take it any fucking more. I just can't take all the nonsense. And you have been lambasted.
Well, there's a lot that people don't see. Well, there's a lot that people don't see. That's the stuff that plays out publicly, and it plays out. A lot of it plays out on Twitter, which I value my happiness more than being active on Twitter. So, like, I'm dead serious. I value.
You're
my
a smart
happiness.
one. You're a smart one.
Yeah, and you don't see the situations where I get that kind of phone call. You don't see the kind of situations where I get phone calls from people in today, for example, Arizona and Georgia, and they're like, we did it. We got more than half the delegates. We got the leadership, the middle work with us. They see it. They see that we're working, they see all these things. You don't see those phone calls where they, like, people just say, oh, well, it's just politics. But it's not. It's a community, and that community has now spawned a culture, and that culture is felt amongst all of us, and it's blatantly obvious when we get all together. This is something I just learned in 2020. I would say I really learned in 2020 was, we went to the national convention, and we had our chair candidate. He lost 60-40, and the night that he lost, that was the only piece of business that was handled that night. So we had no reason to expect that anything good was going to come the next day, when we had the rest of the business. So I was already in my head, fuck, how am I going to, I have to hold everything together. I got to keep people's dick up. I got to, how am I going to do this? And you know what happened? We threw a fucking party, and there was nothing to be solved in the first place.
Boy. That party was a blast, bro. They wouldn't let us. They wouldn't let us hang out at Buffalo Wild Wings except like 6 to a table. And so we were like, "Fuck y'all, we're going to the house."
Yeah, man.
It was awesome.
But that's my point. Is that was the natural response. I didn't organize that. Like I was sitting here panicking, like, oh my god, I have to hold this all together. Meanwhile, everyone's like throwing a party, doing keg stands, and all this shit. And I'm like, and that's when I was like, oh, it's a culture now.
Good.
Like these guys have each other's back, and it's like got a life of its own now. Yeah. Like and Yeah, and you know, I felt it again last year in Pittsburgh. We had like almost 400 people that came out to see Dave Smith, and the energy was just like the Ron Paul thing, man. That's why I don't know if you ever seen that video of me like hosting. I'm like chomping gum like a motherfucker, looking like I'm on ecstasy. It's not that I was on ecstasy; it's that I was feeling it.
Right.
You know, like,
you were on real ecstasy. You were in like a different, like not chemically induced. That's right.
Yeah.
So tell us, where do you go from here?
So for me, the mission is still the same. You know, like it's unfortunate that we have to spend the time and energy that we do to take over the LP, but it is necessary. And you know, the metaphor that I kind of use is, you know, as to why it's necessary is, you know, imagine your city is under siege, right? And you are part of the defense force of that city, but you happen to be armed with a pellet gun. You know, if in the course of you scouting, you come across an armory, but and it's going to take you 3 hours to crack into that armory. That's 3 hours of unimpeded siege. But if you crack open that armory, you're going to actually have a shot. That's kind of how I see this. We have to. The Libertarian Party has not had a long-term goal, a long-term vision, a long-term strategy. It hasn't listened to the liberty movement as to why they are unhappy with it, so that they would come in, and that has got to stop. Like that stuff has got to stop, because we have to fight this battle. I mean, they're taking our veins, like they're literally trying to take our vein, like take control of our veins now. You know, and that seems to be falling apart, but that's not the point. Look at how much they did get away with, and who knows what they're going to get away with
a lot
when they come back with the next thing. Yeah, and it's going to get worse when they come back with the next thing. And it's
if you look at the Patriot Act,
scary.
Yeah, the Patriot Act was like at this point pales in comparison to what they did this time.
Right.
So what do you think is going to happen in 20 years if they, you know, if you follow that
It
same
won't be
timeline?
20 years for one.
Yeah, it might
So
not
there
even be
has
20
to-
years exactly.
So there has to be a Libertarian Party that does something but run washed up people every 4 years for president. There has to be something that engages in the culture and creates a cultural movement and actually changes the Overton window and actually like does things that are realistic and viable, but also radical, like nullification and all of these things. These things have to happen. And it's not going to happen if the party was just allowed to go on the trajectory that it was on. So this is why we have to spend all this time, because what again, there's so much that people don't see. Nobody calls us racist because we helped get shrooms decriminalized in Denver, and that's now spawned like a fucking nationwide psychedelic decriminalization movement. That's not why we get called racist. You know what I mean? Like, nobody calls us racist because we spent $50,000 on local level candidates across the country the past 2 years and got people stopping tax increases and nullifying stuff. You know, they don't call us that. They call us racist because they're losing their positions. You know what I mean? Like they call us bigots because they're losing their positions, and we're displacing them. And I truly think that there's some subset of people who are leadership in the party who this is the closest thing that they have to social status, and this is the closest thing that they have to I don't know, achievement. And I think they still have some faith in democracy as like virtuous. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I got this room of 40 people that have been in the party for 20 years to vote for me. So I'm like, that must mean I'm competent and well-liked, you know, and all this stuff. So like, yeah. And so like, I almost think it's therapy for some people, and I'm not here to be anybody's fucking therapist, man. I'm here to fight the state. So like these changes have to happen. So to actually directly answer your question, right now we're all hands on deck for the national convention in May. We expect to do very well. I obviously can't guarantee anything. We had 2 major victories. We just, delegate-wise, we just carried 2 states that we did not carry in 2020. Nice. And I suspect that there's going to be several more of that and all of that. It's going to be a bumpy ride between now and May because the corruption is getting absolutely out of control. But that's a good thing in a way, because what's happening is these people are revealing. Well, I'm the target, but these.
No, you're over the target.
You're
over the target, so you're taking flack. Yeah,
right. You don't take shots,
but you got to realize.
Yeah.
But there's more to the party than Mises and psychos.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like that's
true.
And that's the important thing here. And there's these other people who are not Mises, who are good people who are just trying to work. And you know, for all they don't care about this stuff. You know, like another metaphor I use is if you're in a grocery store and a gunfight breaks out, okay, legally speaking and libertarian principally speaking, who shot first matters a lot. But for the person that's in the grocery store, nobody gives a fuck. You're just in a gunfight. You know what I mean? And that's where these people are at. You know what I mean? Like these people are just like, these people came along and there's all this fighting now and all this shit. I don't understand, you know, and we have to be the good stewards to show those people that our vision doesn't, if you're down to work with us, we're down to work with you and all of that. Now snakes, smash a snake's head against the rocks. That's what you got to do. But yeah, so we have to go all hands on deck into this convention in May. So what happens after that? Well, my hope is that the culture of the party will start to change. The movement will start to enter the party, and then we will start implementing the changes to scale up the strategy that we're already exhibiting, so that the party will, instead of saying, well, how do we get 5 million votes every 4 years? You know, it's how do we get 5,000 city councilors? How do we create the 1,000 Liechtensteins, like hApp said? You know, like how do we nullify from the local level? Because again, the left has taken over and imposed culture from the top down, but that's not where culture actually comes from. It's all fake. It's all part of the control system. Yeah, it comes from the family up through the community, you know, and so if you're operating at that local level, the culture is what you're mixing it up with. So like we got to operate on that level, and we have to have national messaging that recruits people to get active in that level and actually inspires people and fucks their minds up the way our minds were fucked up by Ron.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and
on that local level too, like, so shout out to one of our other former guests and one of our good friends, Sonny Johnson, who talks about like, this is, if you go look at like how a lot of this stuff happens, like so much of this stuff is like where the money goes from a lot of these federal programs and stuff like that. There are people at the local level who are the funnels through which that travels to go wherever it's going to go. And that influences who votes how. And if those are the only people showing up whenever it comes time to have elections and things like that, then that's who's going to, like, there's a big problem with people not showing up and presenting candidates for some of these races where the people are like, we're getting screwed, but we don't really have an alternative.
Candidates, but also issue.
Yeah,
work.
Issues
the
too. Yeah, exactly.
The party doesn't do issue work, and that's where I think we're going to gain the most ground and actually like make the most real world change. And here's the other one that nobody talks about in the libertarian world: gain the most trust.
Yes,
we have.
Sure.
We don't have brand recognition. Yeah, we don't have brand recognition, let alone brand trust. And right now, the partisan wall is such that we're not a threat to them and we're not a value to them. We can't offer a way to help them destroy their enemies, because that's what this partisan wall is. It's two in-groups trying to destroy each other through politics. It's two culture groups trying to destroy each other through politics. And we're not in those in-groups, and we don't have a value to them, and we can't destroy them, so we're not a threat to them. So it's like, who fucking cares? So we have to figure out a way to break through that wall. And I think the only way to break through that wall is by becoming the catalyst, working these issues. And because like you got rank and file progressives, rank and file conservatives who want certain things that are in overlap with us. And they're not being given that by their political class. So we can exploit that gap and come in and be the catalyst to say, this is what the people want here. This is like a 75% blue town, and you don't have weed to criminalize. What the fuck's your fucking problem? You know what I mean? Like, and then you get some street cred and you build that trust. And trust, I think, is ultimately the currency that's going to do all of this. People aren't going to listen to us until they can trust us.
It's always been about trust, because that's why we're in this fucking predicament in the first place, because people were trusted, you know, and
right.
So, but it's having the right amount of trust and then, you know, actions to follow up those words so that trust can be solidified, because after all this funny hoo-ha, a lot of people are going to be traumatized by trust.
And that's just it. This is the time. There, you know, the people are realizing.
There's never been a better time, I don't think. I mean, God.
This is the fucking time.
I'll tell you another story. Friends of mine, I'm in Pennsylvania. I'm not far from Philly. I got friends who are in Philly, And they had this little idea, you know, they were going to make a website called don'ttreadonphilly.com. And, you know, it was a really simple idea. Like, we're going to print up some flyers. We're going to print up some signs. We're going to build an email list and ultimately try to funnel that into the party. And we're going to try to build a network of people who are opposing the mandates, and, you know, work with them. And so we're going to go to the New Year's parade and distribute this and give it to the people in the parades. And, you know, we did that. Mm-hmm. Well, that very simple and modest idea has now exploded beyond, just the same way that the caucus has exploded. It's exploded for them into this thing where they are now the center of anti-mandate action in Philly, and like the group that's behind the real Anthony Fauci book. You know, they are in contact with our people. The Republican ward leaders in Philly, the Republican state chair, they have attorneys who are looking to sue the city now and try to seek an emergency injunction. They've got informed consent groups, anti-lockdown groups. All these groups are now coming together, looking at them as the center of action in the city against the mandates. And they're coming together to create this like Philly Freedom Coalition, I think they're calling it. There's a huge event going on the 29th in Philly. You know, Maj Toure is involved. But my point is like all these groups came together, and it was just this very modest idea of like, well, why don't we grow our email list? You know, like what? and now it's this thing where they might defeat the friggin' mandates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right that it's the time, and another level that it's the time is you see. So like I don't know if you guys saw that chart with like the new rankings where Joe Rogan's getting like 11 million listeners per episode.
Compared to
Tucker
CNN,
Carlson,
Fox News, and all them. Yeah.
Yeah, man. And Tucker Carlson, he's the biggest show on TV. He's getting what, like 3.3? And you know, Tim Pool, I think, probably has more listeners than
I bet you're right.
What's his what did I just say? Tucker Carlson.
Tucker Carlson, yeah.
Thank you. And but what does that represent? To me, it represents that there already is this huge counterculture in the country that's fucking looking for something to do. They're looking for somewhere to go. They just don't know where to. They don't know what to do, and they don't know where to go. And
it's also
don't have our shit together.
Yeah, it's also a reflection of the demographics too. Where like it's our parents who watch Fox News and CNN and those things, and it's us and the people younger than us that go to YouTube and all these other different things, TikTok and everything else. They probably don't even have like cable or anything like that. You know what I mean? Everything is Netflix, Hulu, you know, whatever shit like that, and then you know YouTube stuff and TikTok and Instagram.
And it's a perfect storm.
Yeah.
You know, Rothbard talked about, and I believe this was in Michigan in 1988, I think. But Rothbard talked about that the worst thing that ever happened to the Libertarian Party was Ronald Reagan. And the reason that he felt that Ronald Reagan was the worst thing to ever happen was because he instilled faith back into the government, into the state. And right now, that mind-addled moron is in charge. No one has fucking faith in the government. They don't trust him. And not only have they shown him to be an idiot, they've shown him to be weak. Look at all his policies that are failing. This is a perfect storm.
Yeah.
And I think that the Mises Caucus is here to fill it, because I believe that God does things on purpose.
So
that's my hope, man.
With that, here's the here's where everybody can go to the Mises Caucus website. We have some links in the description. I want everybody to take their opportunity to do that, but you just go to lpmisescaucus.com and there's the link there, and also you can check the description for Michael's links as well, because I've got the Mises Caucus itself, and then the Take Human Action link as well in the description. So all of those are there. Anything you want to part with? I don't want to keep you too long. I know we've kept you a little over the hour we talked about.
It's all good, man. I'm sorry for being late.
No, that's good.
So last thing I'll say is another concept that I don't hear libertarians talk about much anymore is faith. And you know, that word has a lot of connotations, and usually people think of it religiously, but I think libertarians need to reclaim their faith that when we tell the truth, that it will ring true to people that are open to hearing the truth. And that needs to be the core of what we're doing as libertarians and navigating this world that is infested with lies, infested with a love for this power and all that stuff. And, you know, we're probably never going to convince the majority, and that's okay. You know, we just need to convince enough people to start getting the ideas out there to change the culture and maybe have some parallel structures to the current system, and watch that fall apart on its own as we're off doing our other thing. And that can only happen if we change people's paradigms and we change how they view the world. And I think the only way that we can do that is that we have faith in the truth that we're telling, and lead with that.
That's beautiful.
Amen.
Facts.
Absolutely.
Well, you weren't here when we read this at the beginning of the show, so I'm going to read it again from the one and only Ludwig von Mises. It is vain to fight totalitarianism by adopting totalitarian methods. Freedom can only be won by men unconditionally committed to the principles of freedom. Michael Heise, we appreciate you coming on tonight, man. And we wish you guys all the best. And you got my number. You know where to find me if there's anything I can do to help.
If you don't
out.
have mine,
and,
you can get it from
yeah,
Chad.
That's right. But anything we can do to help, we for sure will. I'm going to do everything I can to get to Reno and to be a delegate again. It'll be third convention in a row. It's just the way things are right now with my schedule, travel wise and everything. My PEC meets at a time that is impossible for me most of the time. So I've been woefully uninvolved in person. I have kept, in the group chat and everything with everybody there, and so they know where I am and where I stand on this stuff. But anyway, I'm going to do everything I can. So we appreciate you guys doing what you're doing, and we appreciate you coming on tonight for sure.
Much.
Hotep and take human action.
That's right.
Hotep and take human action. I love it.
Build. Let's get it.
Right on.
Marcus, send us off, my friend.
All right, everybody, stay free.
Peace.